All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar today, the Learning at Lunchtime webinar. We should be able to fit this neatly into your lunch hour, so hopefully that works that way. Hi, I'm Jackie from HSMAI Asia Pacific. I will just let you know what the agenda is, and then we'll go through and introduce people. So firstly, a little bit about HSMAI. I know some of you, many of you will already know, but I'll give you my 5-minute spiel anyway. And then Sushmit from RateGain is going to give us data right up to yesterday for the Singapore market. So it's right up to date. And then Melinda from the Ascott is going to tell you what you can use that data for to improve your results. And then we'll flip over to Victoria from Accor, and she's going to talk to us about the sales and marketing focus and what we should be doing right now around the different segments, and also some free tools and things that are available for hotels in Singapore. So that's our agenda. So we'll move on. HSMAI is a terrible acronym, even if you speak English as your first language. It stands for Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association International. There's 4 regions in HSMAI. Obviously, we're in Asia Pacific. There's Americas, Europe, and the Middle East is our newest region. The association is 90 years old, so it's pretty old. It's more than 90, really. It's been around a long time, so we probably won't disappear very quickly either. There's members in 41 countries worldwide, and really HSMAI is a non-profit. It's more like a professional society. So if you think of your local hotel associations, they're more about having companies as members, and they do advocacy on behalf of your companies. HSMAI is about individuals, so it's about us all helping each other and growing careers and growing our skills and that sort of thing. So that's the difference between your normal local association. You may know us because we're the issuers of the 2 certifications in revenue management and digital marketing. So there's the CRME and the CHDM. These are global certifications for you to go through. So if you're interested, I'll give you some links, and there'll be some links on the slides I send you at the end. And I will give you, I will send out a link straight away to the recording, and you can download Sushi's slides and Melinda's slides and look at the recording at the end. So that'll have these links in it as well. We've also got some introduction courses for revenue management and for digital marketing. So that's more for people with sort of less than 2-3 years experience in those departments, or people who are managing a revenue department and they don't come from a revenue background. There's revenue and digital ones available. Then the main thing of associations, of course, is we do events. So in Asia Pacific, we do events in 7 markets. India and Japan just started this year. And our annual conference is in Singapore, and that's called the Revenue Optimization Conference, which will be in June next year at Marina Bay Sands. So keep an eye out for invitations to that. Now I'm going to hand over to Sushmit, who's going to dazzle us with his data.
Thank you, Jackie.
I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, let me share my screen. So firstly, thank you so much, everyone, for their time. I know lunchtimes are quite important for a lot of us, but it's great to learn during this time as well. So thank you so much, and got some very interesting points to share today. And thanks, Jackie, for giving us this opportunity. So today, basically, I will talk about the various demand indicators coming into the Singapore market. And one of the interesting things that I would like to talk about is that, and this is how, the kind of data that I'm showing today is based on these fundamentals, which basically talks about what we're going through currently in regards with COVID recovery, right? So it's not the same everywhere. obviously Singapore being a very in terms of taking the lead in terms of vaccination in the Asia Pacific region, is seeing a better recovery and obviously opening up of the new the vaccination travel lanes with different countries and but if you see other countries, obviously it's slightly different, right? So there are certain destinations which are which might pick up faster, which were not initially. I mean, pre-pandemic, those destinations were slightly different, or even the source markets were different. So that's obviously leading to a very fluid environment in regards with the data recovery. Also, the emergence of the new data which comes in, right? So whether it's COVID statistics, whether it's vaccination rates, whether it's any lockdown restrictions, whether it's the bio bubbles being created or the travel lanes being created. What's the cross-country impact as well? So obviously, let's say if there's a strict lockdown in one part of the world, might lead to more business coming in to a different part of the world. We've seen that. In fact, I'll just show in the next few slides an example of that as well. So these are very, very interesting data which are coming in, which is great to be incorporated in getting the demand statistics that we're looking at. Also, the addition of the artificial intelligence and the machine learning is also playing a pretty important role, because with so much of data coming in, it's very interesting how all of these data kind of marry together, and the kind of statistics which come along with it. It's really amazing, and as I said earlier, it's so fluidic. The market is so fluidic because of things are changing on daily basis. So self-time or real-time self-learning is also pretty important, which is actually which a machine learning and AI does help us out with. And last but not the least, what we've also done in regards with correlating data is try and get information from various travel sectors, whether it's car rental or whether it's airlines or alternate accommodation. All of that married together would give you a much better demand indicator, which I'm going to show in the next few slides to take it forward. Now, quickly move on to the next slide. So this is the kind of, just to give you, Norman, RateGain has been using the various data points to actually come out with the demand indicators for specific destinations, and the kind of data that we use is mentioned right here. Obviously, we use a lot of data from COVID statistics, whether it's news, lockdown, vaccination rates, travel lanes, and etc. We're also using OTA GDS searches, using Google Trends and searches, event and holidays, airline scheduling, and weather data. And we marry that with our own proprietary data because we do distribution for over 150,000 hotels globally. So we do have a lot of data coming in from there. Plus, we're also doing rate intelligence for various, not just hotels, but also OTAs. So we do have huge amount of data available there. And then we're also using our the airline data as well into our proprietary airline traffic forecast, traveler forecast, which basically goes into our data lake, and which is powered through the machine learning that we have. So, and why do we use or leverage AI? This is a few interesting use cases that we actually see in here. And the first use case is obviously cross-regional impact. So an example of that would be when lockdowns happened in the European region earlier this year. The demand for Dubai shot up in a big way because obviously people were looking at, rather than traveling to Europe, they end up traveling to Dubai. And the second use case is also the fact that how with the vaccination percentage increasing, it kind of self-learns and adapts to the weightages and parameters, which goes into the demand. So the interesting thing about here is the fact that, again, if you look at the US, until about a few months back, they were having over 200,000 cases on a daily basis. But then with because the vaccination percentage was higher, so the demand did not fall that much as compared to it would have happened with, let's say, a country like India, for that matter, because during the second wave there was devastation, and obviously the demand just went really bad because the vaccination percentage wasn't higher. And obviously the third use case is obviously the sentimental impact, right? So whenever there's a lockdown, which is or restrictions which is put on by the government, it does see a huge drop in case of demand. Obviously, with this also leads to the fact that obviously the vaccination rates aren't higher. So an example for that would be Sydney and Melbourne, where there were very strict lockdowns, and obviously the demand went crashing down. So okay, now coming to Singapore, and I'm talking about certain about 90 days out from now. How do we see the market? And this is the demand indicators as you see right now as of yesterday. We are seeing, if I talk about specific hyperlocal level, obviously we are seeing demand being picked up, especially in the city center area and closer to the airport. The demands are, the demand for hotels is quite high. Even though the COVID numbers were quite high, but the sentiment has obviously, with the vaccination travel lane starting up, the sentiment has gone up. So the current consolidated demand is at 26, which is basically, if I talk about how do we create this scale, we've actually taken into consideration data from Jan 2019. So during these times, we've seen the peaks. And that's been normalized at about 100, the highest demand. So currently the demand is at 26, but we are seeing some really good demand picking up. In fact, doubling up, would reach to about 50 odd within the timelines of second week of Jan. So about 13th to 16th of Jan, the demand is picking up in a big way. We are also seeing some very interesting insights here. Obviously, as you see, the demand is picking up over the next few days, and as I mentioned, 13th to 16th of Jan is the time when there's a huge uptick of demand coming in, upwards of what we're seeing at the moment. So from 26, it would go up to about 54 in these days. And also, I think we were talking interesting thing about the people that are, the inbound traffic coming to Singapore. Obviously, it's led by Malaysia. Recently, I think it's a recent news which came in that the VTL, the vaccination travel lane, has been opened up for Malaysia. And between 29th of November and 5th of December, the seating capacity of airlines have increased by about 350%, which is brilliant. Obviously, Malaysia, and I think we were just chatting. I was just chatting with Victoria a few minutes back, and she just mentioned that Malaysia and Korea are some other markets which would bring in some traffic. But we're also seeing Indonesia, Australia, and Thailand also. With the opening up of Thailand, it's also getting a lot of business into Singapore. And at the moment, obviously, we are anticipating the Asia Pacific region, even though they're not has good numbers in regards with what were the pre-pandemic levels, but Asia Pacific is still leading business into Singapore primarily. And what we've also seen, and I think it's quite interesting in terms of the demand indicators and the use of demand, or the new funnel of data factors which come in, which we've added into this, is the fact that even though we all love the STR reports, and I'm a big fan of STR reports as well, STR actually showed that the Singapore demand hasn't dropped that much, and that's primarily because of the quarantine business which the hotels were getting, and the majority of hotels in Singapore were under government business. Obviously, the demand, in terms of occupancies, didn't fall that much, but then obviously that does not actually mean that there's actually demand. So that's why I'm saying, so the main reason behind adding various factors into this, or various data factors into this, adds a lot more value moving forward. What we've also done at RateGain level is we've created this airline travelers forecast, which obviously includes a lot of our proprietary data, like the O&D AFS, supply network availability, OTA booking forecast, demand, AI macro data, like obviously the COVID advisories and vaccinations. We've been doing this for various airlines. Singapore Airlines is one of them. But we also aggregate a lot of third-party data. So we do get a lot of data from IATA. We do get GDS bookings and so on and searches, through which we've been able to actually create an airline traveler forecast. And based on those factors, here are a few of the observations that we saw as of, and these forecasts are as fresh as last week. So obviously, like I said, we are seeing a dip in COVID numbers since last week. That's great news, and that's obviously leading to more of the VTLs lanes being created. So over the next 30 days, we do see about 174,000 travelers coming into Singapore, which would increase to about 220 within 30 to 60 days time period, about 240K within 60 to 90 days. Regions like USA and Canada, which is North America, is obviously showing a moderate rise, and this is primarily leading to the fact that the Christmas break is coming up. So obviously, the 30 to 60-day window is on the higher side, but it would still take a lot of time for the recovery to be fully complete. What we also see, an interesting fact which we also seeing now, is with the Dubai Expo happening currently. So there's quite a lot of traffic now coming in from Middle East and Africa as well. So obviously people are going for the Expo and coming back. So that obviously means the fact that events are, even cross-regional events are having impact on specific markets as well. And obviously, as I said before, APAC is actually leading the travelers coming into Singapore, and one of the major factors obviously would be Malaysia, and we've seen that with the opening of the VTL. So here's some interesting numbers. We are anticipating obviously about 129,000 people coming in within the next 30 days. And if I compare that with 2020, obviously the numbers are much better. That's great and heartening news, which basically means that vaccinations and so on have created a lot of, I would say, the confidence in people to travel. But if I compare with the pre-COVID levels, obviously it's a long way to go. We're still very, very short of what we anticipate. We're seeing similar kind of trends even in the 31 to 60 days. You see the kind of business, it's obviously doubling up. And if I compare with Europe, for Singapore 2020 versus 2021, the numbers have doubled up, which is great. In fact, more than double, but we're still quite short of what the number pre-COVID, right? So the recovery is long, but the numbers are increasing, and that's good news. And similarly, we also see the prediction for with 3 months out, how things are going within 3 months. So 61, 90 days is again, things are improving, almost double. If I talk about Asia Pacific, it is almost double of what it was till about last year, but we're still quite far off from 2020, 2019 numbers. So that would be from my side. I'll pass on the spotlight to Melinda. Over to you, Melinda. I'm just stopping my screen share.
Thanks, Sushmit. Okay, and I'll start my screen share. Hi, everyone. I'm Melinda from the Ascott. And do let me know if you're able to see my screen.
Yeah, we can now.
Okay, great. Seeing the right thing, yeah?
Yeah.
You're not looking at my emails, are you? Okay. Well, thanks very much for inviting me to share as well. To follow on from Sushmit's point, where he's mentioned demand AI, and the very fancy algorithms behind giving us indicators on demand. I think my role here is really to share what we can do with such information, or how do we look at market demand to help us with our forecast and strategy setting. So if you just give me a few minutes, I'm going to kind of set the stage. This is not going to be news to those who are obviously familiar with Singapore market, but this is our story so far. So obviously looking at STB stats, we can tell that everything was pretty happy all the way in 2019. And then of course, COVID hit. So it hit hard and it hit fast. We were averaging maybe 1.6 million arrivals per month in 2019. And if we're looking at over into 2020 and even up till September 2021, we are just looking at an average of 19,000 arrivals. I mean, that's just like 1% of what we used to get. So obviously we were very, very hard hit. We don't have much of a domestic market. We depend a lot on international travel for our demand and for our business. So that's the sad story of ours. This line that you see on the chart is actually the average length of stay. And that also tells the story, because immediately after COVID hit, when the flights were all cancelled, there were a lot of people that had to stay on, be it the Malaysian workers or be it other people that had arrived. So that average length of stay obviously shot up immediately after. But once things started to settle down, we can see that it sort of does settle a little bit on the average length of stay component, but it's still very high. You know, it's like 8 times of what we used to have in 2019. And that's because of obviously quarantine requirements, etc., that are affecting the situation. Now, looking specifically at the hotel industry, we do see the recoveries on the different tiers of properties. But basically, I would say we were surviving on government policies, right? Dependency on GQF, SHN, all meant that our business mix and business models would change tremendously overnight. Our operations teams had to adapt very, very quickly. And actually, all this while in Singapore, the situation was quite under control, but it wasn't in the rest of the world necessarily. So that kind of prevented us from opening up as well, and remains the case today. It is not anything that Singapore can do unilaterally. We need a lot of coordination, a lot of government policies to be in place for it to work for us, right? So you can see we've kind of been stuck in this norm. Interesting to see is that actually over time, if you look more into the 2021 period, the recovery in terms of ADR and RevPAR are affecting the upscale and the luxury sectors a bit better. The recovery with reference to 2019 seems to be a little bit stronger versus the mid-scale or the economy tiers. So that's just interesting to note on our story so far. And that's been the norm for our past, 14 to 15 months from the hotel industry's perspective. But of course, what we are more interested in now is like moving ahead, right? What's happening? Obviously, vaccination rates are meeting the required levels in Singapore and in many other countries. So obviously, we're all trying to work very hard to get travel up again. It's almost as if like in the past 2 years, right? We were stuck on a particular chapter of our textbook or storybook, and we keep flipping back and forth the pages. This restriction is in, that is lifted, and that else has come in. So you're just within this same chapter doing the same thing over and over again. But finally now it's like we are allowed to turn to the next chapter and start looking and start reading some new fresh content. And so it's really fantastic for the industry. We've been waiting for it for a long time. But really, it doesn't mean that we can put all hands on deck again. Pick up where we left off, do things like the way we did before COVID struck, like all the way back in January, February 2020. Now, I think we all know, and this has been mentioned, of course, by everyone, the pandemic is unprecedented, right? So in modern times, there's no history that we can reference. And of course, being revenue people, it's all about the data, it's all about the trends, it's all about, what you can build. But there is no guide, there's no reference, right? How do we navigate through this recovery? 2020, 2021 historical data, totally different business mix, totally different patterns. Basically, you can't really use it. Even pre-COVID, where it was more normal, now it's not quite normal. So you can't even use those kinds of data. So I guess the point is that we need to use current data, and that's why we're looking at fast data, things that are refreshed very frequently. It's very fresh and it's all forward-looking. Right, so we are going to be basing our forecast and our expectations based on those, because things move very quickly. Now we announced all the VTLs But at the same time, for example, like Germany was one of the first few VTLs that were to be announced. But then again, because of the current situation in Singapore that saw the numbers go up, despite the high vaccination rates, Singapore was again reclassified into a high-risk area for Germany, right? And just a few days ago, the EU Council also then sort of removed Singapore from their no travel ban list. So basically, the EU countries could technically still impose travel bans on Singapore despite our VTLs. So it is an up and down journey. We expect it's not going to be smooth, and therefore, even building from data or trends that you observed 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, may not be relevant moving forward. So it's really in the now, looking at latest data, building your newest patterns, observing for the changes that's going to help us with moving forward on our forecast. So if I were to sort of reference back to Sushmit's solution, for example, with market demand data that we can look at, with the consolidated demand index, I think that's one of the most useful things that I look at if I were to look at a solution like Demand AI. Now, it sounds like there's a lot of intelligence behind this particular index number. So, rather than me digging through from different multiple sources on airline traffic, seats sold, etc., this kind of consolidates everything into one number that I can observe the trend on. So this is a view that I use, and I think is very useful within the solution, basically with the demand index trend over time, this being the past and this into the forward future, and this being plotted against the actual capacity of flights that are coming in. One of the insights that I look at is obviously you see that there is actually a big jump in December for the flights being scheduled, the seat capacity that is coming into Singapore from the various destinations. But the demand index itself hasn't made that similar jump. So to me, this is actually telling me all the news announcements, all the new countries, all the new flights that are being reinstated, be it large capacity aircraft, the 380s, etc., is that actually resulting in a lot of people wanting to travel. And the aggregate of, let's say, the looks and the books of the seats as well as the hotels is what is being reflected within the index. And we don't see that same pattern. Gives me perspective, gives me a context to understand how I should forecast moving forward. I shouldn't be overzealous with it. That's what I'm reading from this chart. And I will just need to, I guess, take that into account when I'm forecasting into the next 90 days, especially, which is the data set here. So together with the flight details, the other thing that we look at, obviously, beyond the capacity and the trend of it is whenever it's not just the capacity, it's also the seat occupancy, right? So it is interesting with the ATF data that just now Sushmit had shared. We actually look at number of bookings and also the actual forecasted figures that they provide, which if I just go here, this is actually the way I interpreted the data. And I think I agree with Sushmit. He says that the bulk of the forecasted weather for each of the time frames, so 30 days out, 30 to 60 days out, 60 to 90 days out, for each of these time frames, basically APAC still remains the bulk of the arrivals into Singapore, whether it's what has been booked or what is being forecasted. But then again, we're also looking at very depressed numbers still. If you look at this, it's really only between 5 to 10% of 2019 level. Again, therefore, substantiating that I need to be a little bit more conservative, perhaps, about what I'm expecting from these markets. We also tend to look at, or would look at, market supply. Now, market supply is something that is reflected here, and we use it to actually indicate, therefore, if this number is increasing, it means that there is more supply opening up. The competitive set or the market is actually shifting away from perhaps the traditional COVID business, be it the GQS or the SHNs, and so to speak. So therefore, there could be some kind of dilution to the demand. So my trend may change because there are more opening up, there's more supply. And then we also keep our eye on certain metrics like the average rates that are being sold as well as booked. And then, of course, the active booking windows. As Sushmit mentioned just now, of course, they flag out certain high demand dates. So with this information, I would also then look at my own data to see whether I'm seeing the same. If I am not, then I would probably want to drill a little bit further to see whether there's any gaps or opportunities that I need to be working on. Now, beyond fancy data that, like, Demand AI or rate gain or any other provider could give us, to be honest, we also look at what is available to us. I mean, there is a lot of other things available to us from different sources. So we do reference our OTA partner platform analytics sections in their systems. So that gives us some granularity to know, because obviously you would have an idea of what are the strengths of each of your OTA partners with the markets that they operate in, what campaigns they've been running. And we observe those to give us more detail as to where we should be targeting our efforts, how we should be positioning ourselves in those particular markets. So I think there's a wealth of data that we look here, especially for source market and average length of stay type patterns, to help us craft exactly how we want to approach the so-called recovery process. And as long as you're looking at the OTA partners, of course, your own brand website, whether you're using Google Hotel Analytics, Meta Search results, basically the reports that you're getting out of your own brand channels is something that you need to also take into consideration and observe from there. For us at Ascott, because we are sort of a long stay product with serviced residences, for us it's very important to also interact and get information from our sales teams, whether it's for long stay, group, and I would imagine that would apply to any other hotel in the Singapore market, getting an idea of when they are ready to move with their corporate travel as well. I think corporate transit is a little bit far off right now for us still, but it will come, and we get those indications through our sales teams as they talk to their contacts even before they book, right? So we know what that expectation is. And of course, the other third-party platforms, I mean, most of us probably have a rate shopper in place, and a lot of those platforms also provide their own market demand indicators, and of course, Forward Star as well. Of course, this is to round off the entire understanding by any specific stay period or any date range that helps us with our forecast and therefore with our pricing and our decisions. So we refer to this whole plethora of information to help us to craft and frame up what we expect. Yeah. Now, just sharing some of the observations that we had, recent observations. I dated here as at 31st of October, because this really changes depending on what comes about. But some things that we did notice is that, with all these different travel lanes being announced, we will see that there is pickup within 1 to 2 weeks in the flight search volumes once these things have been announced. So as at the 31st of October, we do see that the top flight search countries are like Australia, UK, Korea, as was mentioned before, Germany and France. Now, there is a slight lag time before we see the pickup appearing for the hotel searches, a very slight, so it's like 2 or 3 days after the flight search. But of course, we are noticing that the sources are still different. So while the flight searches are increasing for those countries, for Singapore, actually the bulk of the volume of the hotel search is still domestic at this point in time. And then other than that, there is China still there, Australia, USA, and UK. And in terms of inquiries, we note that the inquiries are coming in obviously with the school holidays, as well as opening up the travel lanes and the year-end sort of peak periods. We do see late November and December and into January for the inquiries. And interestingly as well into April and May next year. So that's where we're seeing it coming from. There is a little bit of difference between the leisure and the corporate segments and where the inquiries are coming from. So we don't receive so much for leisure, let's say from the North Asian countries like Japan and Korea, but we are getting actually inquiries for corporate from those markets. So it looks like they are planning in advance for those markets. Yeah. So that's what I had to share, and I will leave you with this little summary, basically to round up how we are doing this whole reiterative process to look at our forecast with all this new evolving data. And in a nutshell, I would say basically for us moving forward, understand that historical data has its limitations, right, in today's forecasting context. So what is important is the fresh, frequent, and forward-looking data that we need to use to forecast and strategize well. Market demand data provides great context and insights to frame our action plans. So it's not the is all and end all. We have to tie it together with obviously our usual pickup and our pace observations. Volatility will remain, although the general trend will be upwards, but we'll have little bumps along the way. But it will be a slow and sure progress, I'm sure. I think I'm more positive this new year than last new year, Jackie. forecasts and strategies will be iterative. So you need to keep adjusting. So on two fronts, you need to work with your systems and with your commercial colleagues to ensure that you can execute and adapt your strategies efficiently, because things are going to move fast. And at the end of the day, navigating out of COVID is a journey of managing our shift in the business mix at the right time that will allow us to meet our targets. So that's the way we're approaching it, the recovery process, making use of all of this data and hopefully allowing us to do it in an optimal manner as we emerge from COVID. That's all from me. Thank you. I shall stop sharing my screen and hand over
Thanks,
to
Mel.
Victoria.
That was great.
No problem.
That was great. And I like the way you showed us different types of data that you can use and, you know, how valuable it is to get data.
In
from
reality, it
different
is very
sources
useful.
to verify what you're seeing and what your response to that is. Yeah, great. Well, if anyone has questions, pop them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll move on and speak to Victoria next. But we can have some questions at the end, and so all the data geeks can ask Sushmit or Mel anything they like. Okay, so Victoria, there you go. We've got all the data we need. What are we going to do about it? What are sales and marketing going to do about it?
All the
What
pressure
should
is on
we
us.
be doing right now?
All the pressure's on us, as usual, to drive the top line. Great. Jackie, would you just share one of my slides, please? That would be great. The introduction. Because I've done one per question that you've posed. So let's start. Good afternoon, everyone from Singapore. And Jackie, thanks for inviting Accor to join this discussion.
Thank you.
I mean, just to start, yeah, there's no doubt the last 18 months have been the hardest period that we have ever experienced in our hotel and travel industry. The COVID-19 pandemic has severely impacted our region. And whilst we are hoping for some recovery in 2022, the future and the speed of that is very unclear. With the rollout of vaccines underway across our regional countries, we are hopeful that this will lead to the beginning of the momentum that is required for 2022's full recovery. These positive movements by governments, there's great intent and appetite for countries to reopen their borders, as the hospitality industry does contribute respectively to the GDP. And we've seen this recently for Accor in particular, with the opening of the Phuket Sandbox. It's been very positive for us. We have a large portfolio in Phuket, and we've really started to see the movement in the right direction. I look after the Maldives for Accor as well, and we've never been closed. So it's been very interesting to see a destination in our region that never closed through the whole COVID period, who has been having an unprecedented year, regardless of the fact that China used to be 30% of the driving factor there. No China business, and we are up on 2019 levels across a handful of key markets. So we know when we're ready, it's coming back. So that's good for us to be able to be in a market that is operating normally as well. So, but coming back to Singapore, which is our home and our base, the first question that Jackie asked me to cover was, from a sales and marketing perspective, what should we in Singapore as hoteliers be doing right now to reconnect with international markets and to leverage the domestic? So I think firstly, as we saw last week from STB, their update on their planning, they are going to be very active in marketing internationally, and we thank and applaud them for that. However, the current and future restrictions in Singapore do not make it a desirable destination to travel to, and we need to be realistic, and that business and leisure travelers will be limited until they can have a stress-free and relatively restrictive-free travel to Singapore. As an industry, we need to work together, and we need to be coordinated with our clear messaging. We need to build confidence on the opening up of Singapore. And in total, we are not only selecting on certain specific VTLs. The VTL is a good start to opening Singapore, no question about that. But it does require refining the process and to catering to the sheer scale required to support the hotel industry. We have over 66,000 beds here in the city and Sentosa combined. That's a huge amount of inventory. In our view, the VTL activation plans are all about timing. It's critical that we get the timing right when we're going to be spending our money on activating these VTLs. Because currently what we see is predominantly EU countries are going to be the big benefactors of the current VTLs, because Singapore residents finally being able to travel again to visit friends and relatives and or go on holidays. So we're not seeing that reciprocal scalability yet. Our challenge is to get people to travel to Singapore from the EU and not to stay with friends and relatives on VFR. And those numbers need to be in scale to give key impacts to our hotel occupancies. We require Singapore to drive confidence and let prospective tourists know that we are a safe and, at that point, a relatively restriction-free destination to visit. At the moment, that's not the case. As we need Singapore's occupancy, as we know, Singapore's occupancy on pre-COVID is largely linked and dependent on business individuals and business groups. And it's instrumental to our country hospitality industry that we work collectively together with STB on an action plan for PCOs to resume and return to Singapore faster on congress and events. And so we can position Singapore back where it used to be pre-COVID as a safe top destination in Asia to have a PCO, MICE business or corporate. From an international flow point of view, we need to encourage longer stays and come up with itineraries of 5 and 7 days. And we've been discussing this with STB at length over the last couple of months. The longer they stay, the more sustainable the stay is. And an opportunity for us to come out of this pandemic and reposition Singapore, not as it's been known in the past as a stopover destination, but work on a mono destination model as well. We need to change that perception, and we need to encourage with innovative product offerings those longer stays to Singapore. And this also helps us with that whole CSR piece with cutting carbon, with less inter-regional multi-centers and coming to Singapore because you want to come to Singapore, not just for a 1 or 2 night hop to Vietnam, Cambodia, Bali, wherever else. In terms of the domestic perspective, this is a huge challenge. It's essential for us to continue to innovate our staycation offering in order for us to keep the local market engaged. We know what the local market's like. It can be quite fickle. We've been locked in for 2 years now. We've done Sentosa to death. How do we become creative with our offering to attract a long-term sustainable activation? You know, the domestic market for Singapore has in the past not really been an entity. I see this as an opportunity for us as hoteliers to get a proportion of your business that you can have as domestic. Before I came to Singapore, I was with Accor 15 years in Thailand, and the domestic market was such an instrumental part of our revenue contribution. We want to be able to do that for Singapore going out of COVID and be able to sustain local activation. So there's a real opportunity for us as hoteliers. We need to be more strategic and less reactive. We see this every time there's a Klook deal. We're all watching whatever's pricing's going on, and we are reactive. It's just the environment we're in at the moment. But this could be said for both domestic and international moving forward. How do we build the booking pace? Once we have better visibility of the quarantine status contracts, then we can. But right now, with not knowing when we're coming in and out of quarantine contracts, we're not able to market to these VTLs effectively. And that's, obviously concerning. There is no doubt there is a huge risk. We believe that when we do come out of the quarantine programs for the vast majority of our hotels, there is going to be a lull. And once we switch models, we need to be gaining momentum. And without a doubt, this is a risk for all of us in Singapore. In summary, on the domestic market, be this domestic or international that we're talking to, the generation of relevant, engaging, and aspirational content and streamlining the customer journey is essential. And that's what we as hoteliers in Singapore need to be preparing for now. Another question that I was asked to look at is corporate. What about corporate? Is corporate coming back? Yes, of course, corporate's coming back. We anticipate for it to return to Singapore at the same levels or even better levels than we were pre-COVID. I guess the questions are when and how fast and at what scalability. And I don't believe at this stage any of us have clarity on corporate demand for Singapore moving forward. We're all doing our RFPs, we're all taking forward business as we can, but unless the restrictions start to move in the right direction, I believe we will see cancellations and we will lose momentum of those international RFPs. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how quickly the delegation, Bloomberg's going to be a very interesting part. We're part of that with Raffles. How interesting it's going to be to see the first pilot of its type for Singapore, and hopefully it will be a huge success so we can start opening up more. In terms of what I think Singapore should be focusing on as well is, at this stage, you know, if we look at it, it's difficult to comprehend why corporates will come to Singapore currently until domestically we can return to our corporate offices and they can conduct the necessary business they need face to face. Without these limited restrictions, at the stage, you know, the start of some of the key corporate VTLs we've seen, we're seeing a slight trickle only of C-suite executives coming to Singapore for essential business or project reasons, and the lengths of stay are short. So in no way is the VTL action showing us that corporates are coming back in the numbers that they need to be, and it's only the senior executives. Singapore needs to amplify its communication strategy to this segment, and we need to instill confidence. We need to provide initiatives. We need to add value and attract, again, as I say, the scalability we need for our city to get back onto the path of recovery in the corporate sector. My last question that I was asked to look at was content and tools available to hotels. Well, as I run the top line, this is all of my area, SMDL. This is my forte. So revenue, loyalty, distribution, commercial, marketing. So I'm giving you my view. The focus for me and our properties here, focus on your strengths. What is your business good at? There is no doubt there is pent up demand domestically and globally to travel again. It's about understanding your customers' motivation to travel. And ask yourself, why Singapore? Put yourself in a global perspective. Why would you come to Singapore? We take it for granted, you know, we have this beautiful city, it's safe, it's green, we have multicultural facets, we have phenomenal food and beverage, we have beautiful sites. How do we look at this differently and put our shoes in that perspective from that customer's belief? I believe it's essential to take this different approach pre-COVID and really customize our offering and messaging to resonate with the target audience you are focusing on. In terms of the key pillars that I'm using with my properties for the pandemic recoveries, we're evolving our digital marketing strategies. We need to be relevant to the post-pandemic audience. We need to understand what is important to them. We need to align strategies, and you need to align your strategies with those customers accordingly. The customer journey, I speak about that again, and loyalty is essential to attract, reward, and build a loyal customer client following. CSR and wellness. We read now more than ever that global customers are valuing safety and sustainability efforts way more than price. This is across all categories of hotels. We see this in Europe. So we've had a really good year in Europe where they're walking around without masks. The Accor hotels have done really well. But people are wanting, doesn't matter if you're staying from an Ibis Styles all the way up to a Raffles, they are asking predominantly about safety, CSR, wellness. They want to know, what are we doing for our people as well? So this is a real mind shift change. And if you can resonate your strategies around those emotions, this will allow you to really take advantage of showcasing your key attributes and standing out. The overarching destination strategy for recovery recently shared by STB is fantastic. The Singapore Reimagine pre-opening marketing plan. And it's a great initiative for us as hoteliers to participate and help them amplify their efforts. So as an industry, we need to get behind these kinds of campaigns and align our vision for the recovery of Singapore. In closing from me, we are curiously and cautiously optimistic and anticipate that at some point in 2022, we will be able to revert to welcoming international guests back to our hotels in the numbers we need to sustain the occupancies and our teams, and to put that passion back into our industry, and to offer quality experiences and capitalize those opportunities in front of us to deliver the optimum return on our owners' results. And ultimately, that's what it's about, you know, saving jobs, getting back on track, and bringing our industry back to where it needs to be. Thanks for having me.
Great. Thanks, Victoria. That was very informative. I have some questions. I hope everyone else does. Please type some into the chat or Q&A if you want to ask something. Don't be shy. Victoria, one question is sort of personal, because what's the restrictions? HSMAI is running some roundtables in December in Singapore. Should I come from Australia? What's going to happen to me?
That's a very leading question. That's a government question.
Let's see your sales skills now. I got a one-day meeting to go to at Marina Bay Sands with 25 people or something. Should I come? What will happen? Am I allowed to go? Will I have to get tests? I'm vaccinated.
Yes, so I think you need to manage expectations, your expectations. If you believe that you're going to be able to be walking around freely without a mask, intermingling, going out at night after 10, drinking, socializing, that we need to work around the domestic restrictions. However, I can't speak from a place of knowledge on this one, because I actually was at MBS 2 weeks ago. We attended a conference of about 250 women. It was called She Brilliance. It was fantastic. It's about women in the industries and women empowering women. And we were sitting at 10 per table. So we were not allowed to intermingle with each other, but we sat in an open forum. We had guest speakers. The president joined us. She joined as well as a guest speaker. So it was informative. As a M&E pre-COVID kind of person where, we would attend a lot of events and so forth, it was a different environment. But my mindset was catering to the restrictions, because I understand the restrictions, and working around those restrictions. But we still had a fantastic day together, brainstorming, breaking out into sessions. And afterwards, even though we were 2 at a table, now you could be 5, we had a drink afterwards and networked. So my answer to you would be yes, book it, and book Accor. Not MBS. Sorry, MBS colleagues.
And that may be about budget as well, sorry. Great. All right. Well, that's encouraging. Good. One of the other things I saw that STB had was where they basically were providing text and images and sort of information about activities that people can do in Singapore. So a hotel could take some of that content that they're giving you and, sort of try to create a package out of it. Advertise some things on your website or on your social to say, come to Singapore and go to whatever. So I think they've got a whole bunch of content and things that hotels can use to try to put together some of the things that Victoria was talking about addressing why does someone want to go to Singapore. So you're really lucky to have STB. They're fantastic. We're kind of lucky in Australia to have Tourism Australia as well, but there's not loads of countries that have such fantastic organisations like that. So take advantage of it, and they've put a lot of work into putting some things together for you. So yeah, hopefully that will help. Now, has anyone got a question? I will stop sharing my screen. Did anyone put forward a question? No? Really? You have experts. You have 3 experts standing here waiting for your questions. No?
I'd like to think that therefore we addressed all their questions in our presentations.
You guys are amazing. You must have answered all the questions. And I think another thing we could probably ask is about what type of things can we do to improve the customer journey in regards to the current situation? Is it about content? Is it about making sure you've got the right content and information about restrictions and things? What are the types of things that hotels can do?
I think there's two things. Most of the chain hotels have, we have a thing called All Safe. So it's about that clinical communication and the reassurance. But then, you know, we also have to appreciate that a lot of people haven't been traveling and there's a passion for travel. So the content needs to be focused around the safety aspect of staying at our properties, but also at the same time, selling dreams, because that's what we do. And that content generation to really entice people, you know, to come spend their money in Singapore, we need to be catering our content, visual content, as well as offering to something different, to taking them outside of their norm.
Great. Okay. What else? What other questions can I ask? Oh, actually, someone's put something in. All right, Melinda, one for you.
Yes.
For residential apartments with minimum length of stay 6 nights, what type of packages are you selling? That's a bit of a competitive question, isn't it? Do you want the rate too?
Yeah, well, not all our products are just residential apartments. So yes, those that still have the minimum length of stay requirements. So we rely a lot more on the COVID business for those properties. But of course, those that also have the hotel license are the ones which we do market a little bit more into the domestic audience. But I think the hotels are up, you know, have a one up on us on that anyway, because we don't necessarily have the facilities that the staycay market is looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, I think our business mix was slightly different. I mean, you guys would have looked at, you know, staycay taking a much larger. It did increase for us, but obviously for us, it was looking at project groups as well as student accommodation that helped to tide us through. And so we're on the same recovery journey in terms of how do we balance that up for the optimal mix as the regular type of segments come back into the market. Yeah. I hope that addressed your questions.
Thank you, Sandy. And so with the long stay sort of apartments,
yep,
I would be thinking that with people coming in to visit relatives, are they staying longer than they used to stay when they visited a relative? So are they looking more for that type of property? You know, even though they're visiting relatives, they're not staying there. Would they stay longer? I don't know. I feel like our trips are going to be less often and longer.
Yeah. So they have been longer. One observation we had, interestingly enough, of course, those usually the visit friend and family people are the ones that are coming first once these travel lanes open up. And you know, when we were looking at the flight data, and we would say, oh, you know, there's quite a bit of traffic from Indonesia and Thailand and things like that. But we noticed that our mix was actually quite different from it. So proportionately, for example, Australians were booking more for the long stay with us. We didn't see so much of the APAC region ones. And, you know, at the end of the day, we kind of assessed it to be more of how people's patterns are. So I think maybe those coming in from Australia visiting friends and relatives would still be staying in an outside location in a service apartment, therefore they are booking. But for those from Indonesia and Thailand, they probably are staying with their relatives once they have cleared through their quarantine requirements.
Right.
So yeah, so there was a slight difference there. Yeah, for sure.
That's good. Okay, well, thank you everybody for sharing your knowledge and experience. For everybody on the call, there's some of the slides will be available. They're already waiting. I'll get the recording ready. We'll stick it up on the website and we'll send you an email out shortly. That'll be today. I'm making a promise I hope I can keep. And you'll be able to watch the recording or share with people who couldn't come. Also, I noticed in the list of people who registered, some people are from different markets. We have a session we did a couple of weeks ago in Japan for those from Japan. So I'll include the link in the EDM I send out for the recording for that one. And in a couple of weeks, we're doing a Thailand one, and a few weeks after that one in India. So if you want to come back for those ones, that would be great. You can also learn more. We have a YouTube channel with loads of sessions on there. And in our Academy website, you can find some on-demand online courses, some webinar style courses and the certifications there. So you can pop onto any of those places and have a look to learn more. Well, thank you, everybody. And I hope that your recovery keeps on going well. And I really hope that I'm there in a few weeks' time.
Thanks for organizing everything at
Thank
HSMAI
you.
and Jackie.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye.
Jackie.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jackie.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.